Hey, welcome back. If you've been following along, you'll know that stock photos are used for countless different purposes these days, and there's really very few subjects that aren't going to have some sort of commercial potential if you shoot them the right way. We've covered the basic market research processes of asking yourself who is likely to use the subject matter and then working out in as much detail as possible what they need the image to do, and from that, how you need to capture it. Most people seem to get that okay, and I got a lot of good feedback, thank you. But I also had a couple of people asking for a cheat sheet of sorts, a quick reference to the most common elements and characteristics in the images that we see selling best through Global Eye. So here it is. While photos of pretty much anything can sell, realistically they won't. The photos that do sell are usually going to meet some fairly standard criteria. Obviously there will be exceptions, but more often than not the best selling stock photos will usually share some of the following traits. Most will feature a strong, simple subject. The stock photos that sell best are almost always of something, and it's usually instantly recognisable. Vague, empty landscapes simply don't sell as stock, just as cluttered scenes rarely sell. And anything where the viewer has to work hard to identify the main subject is unlikely to interest too many stock buyers. These stock buyers either need an illustration image, in which case subtle isn't a lot of help, or also need an image that conveys a specific idea or message. So again, if the viewer needs to decipher it at all, the photo buyer's own message isn't going to get through. It's important to remember your photo is playing a supporting role and the buyer's purpose and message always come first. So accordingly, you'll need a strong foreground subject. The main subject is usually going to be positioned right up in the foreground, and there'll be minimal clutter or distractions in the rest of the image. Sometimes there will be other elements adding layers of depth and meaning, but the photographer will leave no question as to what the image is about and what they want you to look at. Correct use of depth of field is crucial here, as is strong composition and strong directional lines, all working together to put the emphasis exactly where the photographer wants it. Backgrounds are usually simple and quite complementary. They add to the message without distracting from the main point of interest. There'll be no strong design elements interfering with the main message, no objects or people chopped off accidentally, and nothing directing the viewer's attention out of the frame. This isn't to say the background isn't important though. Exposure and composition still need to be considered. For example, washed out skies are rarely going to sell, no matter how well captured or how interesting the main subject might be. That's okay though, because a lot of this can easily be adjusted in Photoshop, so there's no need to publish a photo that's not quite right in this regard. Simple cropping can sort out the minor composition issues, and with a little practice you'll find it's quite easy to polarise skies and even adjust the depth of field in Photoshop if need be. And there will be people. Not in every image, but I'd estimate at least half the images we sell through Global Eye have people in them. When you consider how many other subjects there are in the library, that puts a lot of value on including people. The key is to do it naturally. The overcooked cliché images of 15 years ago just don't sell much anymore, and the microstocks are full to overflowing with them anyway, giving them away for peanuts, so don't even worry about those. Instead, focus on the high value buyers that are looking for the experience images. Those shots where the photographer manages to capture something of what the person in the frame is actually experiencing, whether it's physically or emotionally. People need to be included logically and believably. They're usually carefully posed, but there's no suggestion that they're simply posing for the camera. I guess the best way to describe it is that they're usually strongly connected to whatever situation the photographer has put them in. People are key here. No matter what field of work interests you most, get people into the scene every chance you can get, even if it just means planning ahead so people will be there where you need them to be when you take the shot. And when you do include people, faces need to be visible and emotions clearly conveyed. If the face is visible, more often than not, the eyes will be the key focal point. Where people are included, they're used to convey emotions and ideas, so vague expressions or obscured faces have little value to most stock buyers. The big problem we see here all the time is faces in shadow. If you're going to have people in there, make sure you use appropriate lighting to light up the face, capture the eyes, so your viewers know exactly what the person in the image is experiencing. If there are multiple people in the frame, they're usually going to be connected in some way, whether it's physically or just a look between them. Either way, it needs to be totally natural, and again, it gives a sense that they're there for a reason and not just posing for the camera. Symbols and props are used constantly. Quite often there'll be carefully selected objects that add real depth to the message the photo conveys. These will be carefully selected and positioned in a way that adds complementary meaning without distracting the viewer. They're usually quite subtle and secondary, almost subliminal, positioned in a way that the viewer will only really notice them after they've looked at the main subject for a moment or two. You can also use props to create variations. Often a variety of props or clothing or accessory items will be used to capture a series of similar images with very different meanings. The more prolific photographers will do this constantly, capturing dozens of different storylines from every single situation, each carefully developing a different message for a different potential buyer type. The key here is to keep it current. The only thing that changes faster than fashion these days is technologies, so you need to use the latest gadgets or don't bother. Likewise, be aware of clothing and grooming styles and look for timeless props to extend the working life of your images as much as possible. And you'll seriously increase your commercial potential if you make it a habit to introduce life and movement and action into your shots. As photographers, we tend to want to photograph stationary subjects. It's just easier to capture something that isn't moving. So it's also the kind of subject that every other photographer out there is going to shoot. And it's also more likely to be a bit dull or boring. And a buyer will almost always choose the action shot over the bland portrait. And that goes for virtually any subject you can imagine. A child engrossed with the toy will always outsell the photo of a child holding the toy looking at the camera. A galloping horse will outsell the horse standing still grazing in the middle of the paddock. A sailboat underway, canvas full, tilting from the wind, will outsell the shot of the boat tied up at the pier. A lion stalking its prey will outsell the shot of the lion sleeping in the shade. A couple enjoying a glass of wine will outsell the still life of the wine bottle and two glasses. This isn't to say the more static shots won't sell, only that you'll face much more competition for much lower demand. So you should always be on the lookout for ways to introduce some sense of movement and energy into your shots. In a similar way, you want to make sure you always avoid the dull and mundane. A lot of the photos we see around here that we just know are never going to sell are generally quite good photographs, but they're what I refer to as nice nothing photos. These are the photos that are very well executed. They usually have some quite nice colours or lines or textures going on, but there's just not much else. The main point of interest is a little bit weak, and there's no story at all, and they're basically just a little bit boring. You get the sense that the moment probably meant something to the photographer, but it hasn't been captured or conveyed. And the most common example of this is the big empty sunset. We do see a lot of these, and you can imagine at the time it was a pretty spectacular experience, but as a photo, you just kind of look at it and think, yeah, nice colours, what's next? So at the risk of upsetting the sunset shooters, I've got to say there is virtually zero demand for any empty landscapes, especially sunsets and sunrises. They're almost always going to be boring to anyone who wasn't there. If you do shoot these, you have two choices. You either put something of interest in the foreground at the time, or you use them as Photoshop backgrounds for your other images. There's little point doing much with them unless they are absolutely spectacular. It's also worth noting, when you are editing your selection, always make sure you're evaluating the image in front of you and not being swayed by your memory of the occasion. This happens a lot with the sunrise and sunset shots, which do make a very lasting impression. So much so, you experience some of the same emotions when you look at the image later on, and the problem is your viewers won't have that same experience, so they'll just see another nice nothing photo. Probably the one thing you want to do more than anything else is really work on developing your own personal style. My final suggestion here is to avoid looking for people like me to tell you what to shoot to make sales. Instead, you should focus on learning all you can about your preferred subject, who uses them, and what they need from the images. And then use that information to develop your own client-focused system for shooting. Make it a habit to constantly look out for published examples of your subjects. Notice how the photographer has captured the material, the messages they convey, and most important of all, think about why it works for the buyer. From there you can develop your own ideas for improving on that, which in no time at all will become your own personal and quite commercial style. In our stock library situation, photo buyers search by subject, but the buying decisions almost always come down to the message conveyed. So in a similar way, you should be doing your own market research constantly. If you're just getting started in stock photography, you need to be studying every published image you can find of your main subjects. But once you find one, make sure you focus on the message rather than the subject. That's where you'll make your sales. Okay, so wrapping up, while there are definitely strong commercial themes, concepts and subjects that do sell quite well, I am reluctant to list them here because I know without a shadow of a doubt that a lot of photographers will just run out and shoot them, thinking that's all they need to do to shoot commercial images. In fact, once we tried publishing a list of in-demand subjects on OzImages, and it was a disaster. All we got was a large number of mediocre photos of these subjects, and that's probably being a bit generous. Basically, the client-focused thought process wasn't there, so there was little commercial potential in most of them. But to make it even worse, most of the photographers who shot these images were operating outside their normal fields of work and interests, so most of the images were little more than snapshots. and some of these came from some very talented and experienced photographers. But as soon as they started focusing on a subject that was outside their genuine interests and experience, the results were mostly pretty awful. So the final thought here is, there is real value in shooting the subjects that you know intimately and are passionate about. When your interest is genuine, you will put in the time to get to know your subject and to really understand what it is about it that interests people. And you'll get better photos as a result because you're able to say something about it instead of simply documenting it. Okay, that's about it for now. As always, if you're ready to take the next step, I will encourage you to register with Global Eye below and watch our full business presentation. Then if it sounds like it could be a good platform for your work, then I'll encourage you to submit a membership application. There's no cost or obligation, just some objective feedback on your work and the opportunity to get all the information you need before you make up your mind. So click the button below and I'll see you on the inside.